Just take a couple seconds to go live.
Okay.
But, yeah.
I think we're good now, Katie.
Yep, we're good. Just
Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Welcome to and congratulations, because we are no longer the ad hoc Rules and Bylaws Committee. We're now the standing Rules and Bylaws Committee. We have the West Virginia Democratic Party Executive Committee adopted the majority of the proposals that we had recommended to them. In fact, they did all of them except two sections that we pulled out right at the end, and that was a mutual consent of ours. And so anyway, so we, and the other thing that happened is Dottie Berger, who is a new member on the State Executive Committee, was nominated by Bob and elected unanimously to serve as the CD representative from CD2. So I'd like to introduce Dottie, and for those who don't know him, Dottie, maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself. You're muted.
I do know how to operate the mute button, so let me start with, let's see. I came to this country in 1917 to grad school, and then said I would never be a faculty member, so that's what I spent the next 50 years doing. I retired from WVU in 2015. And decided that since I didn't have to hide my political affiliations any longer for the students, I got involved with the Dems and the NAACP. So I've been working with them. I'm the one of the co-chairs of the Affirmative Action statewide committee. And I'm the second vice president for the NAACP in the Morgantown-Kingwood area, with no intention of moving up to first if our president decides to quit because she's now a member of the legislature. So with that, I'll quit and let the meeting proceed.
Well, I just wanted to tell you all that not very many people would appreciate, but I think everybody on this committee would appreciate. So Dottie was elected as the co-chair of the AAC on Thursday night, immediately before we had our last meeting on May 11th. And so by virtue of that position, he is automatically a member of the State Executive Committee. It's an ex officio position. And he, because, I knew, he knew that we were doing bylaw changes. He knew he would be voting on those. I can't remember if I just outright sent those to you or you requested them. I can't remember. But anyway, he got a copy of the bylaw proposals. So within I don't know, 4 or 5 hours of me sending them to him, he sent me back an email that pointed out different, some of them were like little technical things or a recommendation. I mean, they were 6 or 7 different things. And I had been really racking my brain about who would be really good to be on this committee, and I'd even approached a couple people, and they're like, well, if you don't have anybody else, I'll do it, but try to find somebody else. And I got that email and I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy is perfect. So I asked him if he would be interested, and he said yes. And so anyway, he was the only one nominated, bless his heart. But we were really, it was very clear to me that he has an interest in and also a talent in terms of a very, very clear eye for detail. And this is a very detail-oriented group. So to me, he just ended up being a perfect fit. So thank you so much for being willing to serve, Dottie.
Well, I've had 30 years of nitpicking theses, so.
Okay. All right. Well, let me call the roll. So Bob Baker,
Here.
Dottie Berger,
Yeah,
Matt Halterman,
Present.
Ray Whiting,
Present.
Deb McCarthy,
Present.
Maria Russo. I do not see her on here, and I texted her and she didn't respond, but hopefully she can join us later. Judy Stevens
Here.
and Selena Vickers here. All right, so the only person we're missing is Maria. We're also joined by Katie Blount from the West Virginia Democratic Party. Thank you so much, Katie, for being on here and taking care of us in terms of all the behind the scenes technical stuff. We really appreciate you. So the first thing is that I don't think I have. Yes, okay, I'm sorry. The first thing that we want to do, past roll call, is to have the election. Go ahead, Mac, I'm sorry.
I was going to move to open nominations for the pro temp chair.
Go ahead. Yeah, so I was going to move to election of pro tem, so go ahead and do that, Mac.
I'd like to nominate Selena Vickers for pro temp chair.
Thank
I
you.
second that.
Are there any other nominations for chair pro tem? Any other nominations? Any other nominations for chair pro tem? And let me just mention for anybody who is watching on YouTube live, we do not have a chair, and so our process is for the secretary to open the meeting and to immediately move to the election of a chair pro tem to lead that to chair that meeting. Hearing no further nominations, the nominations for chair pro tem are closed.
I
I'll-
move we elect Selena Vickers chair pro tem by acclamation.
I second that.
All in favor of electing Selena Vickers chair pro tem, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
right.
Aye.
All right, thank you all very much. All right, now we're moving into election of the chair for the Standing Rules and Bylaws Committee. Are there any nominations for the chair of the Standing Rules and Bylaws Committee? Judy?
I nominate Selena Vickers for chairman.
I second.
Are there any other nominations for chair? Any other nominations for chair? Go ahead, Mac.
Considering this office, I don't believe it should be contested. I'll go ahead and throw my own hat in the ring.
So Mac Halterman. Thank you. Are there any other nominations? Any other nominations for chair? Okay, so we have two people nominated for chair, Selena Vickers and Mac Halterman. Nikki, what would you have a recommendation for the best way for us to do this? Should we just do a roll call vote, go through the roll and ask the person who they would like to vote for, or do one and ask for the ayes and then the name? And what is your recommendation for the best way for us to proceed?
I would do a roll call. I would just go ahead and do the roll call on the first one you mentioned.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So
Viva Voce.
I'm sorry, what?
The second one's a Viva Voce.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, so I'm going to go down the roll call and just state who your choice is for chair. Bob Baker,
Selena Vickers.
Dottie Berger,
Selena Vickers.
Matt Halterman,
Selena Vickers.
Ray Whiting,
Selena.
Deb McCarthy,
Selena.
Maria Russo she hasn't joined us, Judy Stevens,
Selena.
Selena Vickers, abstain. All right, so with that count of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in favor of Selena Vickers. Selena Vickers has elected chair. All right, thank you all very much. I very much appreciate your confidence in me, and Mac, thank you for throwing your hat in the ring. I think you would make a very fine chair, and you certainly make a very fine member of this committee, and I appreciate your work very much. All right, so let's move on to the approval of the agenda. Send out a draft agenda for consideration. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda as presented, or are there any changes?
So moved.
To adopt it?
Second.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Any discussion? All right, all in favor of adopting the agenda as presented, please indicate by saying aye.
9.
Aye.
Okay. And the agenda is adopted. All right, so let's move on to the minute. Approving the minute. Let me see if I can share my screen. Okay, do you see the screen that says April 27, 2023 minutes and notes?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. So here are the minutes to our April 20, or draft minutes, I'm sorry, to our April 27th meeting. These were sent out a little bit before this meeting. Are there any corrections to these minutes?
That
Okay.
says April 6th roll call. Is that it? Should that be April 27th roll
It
call?
should be, yes, it should. Thank you for catching that. Any other corrections? Okay, is there a motion to accept the minutes as edited?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor of adopting the minutes as edited, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Okay, any opposed? Okay, all right, now let me see if I can just click on this and see if this will work. You now see May 11 notes. Is that what you see on the screen?
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, so on May 11th was our next meeting. It wasn't a formal meeting, like we didn't do any business. We had already agreed that it would just be a presentation. I honestly don't even know, and Nikki could probably tell me if I needed to do this, but I don't think there's anything wrong with doing it. But I didn't put minutes. I just put these as notes and just said that it wasn't a business meeting and what we did. Nikki, do you have a thought on this?
She stepped out, but it's essentially just a report. It'd just be a report from the secretary.
Okay,
Doesn't need to be minutes.
right. I knew it wasn't minutes because we didn't do any bit. I'm just going to put report of the secretary. How's that? Okay, because it's just a report, do we have to adopt it, Mac? Or should we adopt it, have a motion to adopt the report?
Reports are informational only. You can just receive it and place it on
Okay.
file.
All right, we will do that. Stop the share. So you have that report. Okay, so the next thing that is on our agenda is a little bit more complicated than our typical situation. So what happened is we had a lot of proposals that we sent to the state executive committee for their consideration. And just so you know, I mean, like, really, congratulations to all of us. I mean, there was some really good discussion. There was some good discussion at the May 11th presentation. I think probably most of us had good discussions with people. There were some questions. one of the questions that there was actually a motion to change some things that ended up not happening. But it was over the county chair situation, or the vice chair. Some people felt that we were just eliminating that position. Of course, we weren't eliminating it. We were just saying that it's not a requirement. And of course, any county that wanted to have that could. But aside from that, everything passed and without amendment. However, because of some new information that we received literally just days before, we kind of I contacted everybody to make sure everybody was okay with it. We pulled a couple sections. Let me. I'll pull it up in just a minute. Actually, it might help to just show it and then take it off. But we'll talk about the attendance part first. Okay, so it's this section right here, and it's new Article 5, Section 3, attendance and proxy. So we spent a really, really large amount of time working on this, trying to get this just right. And so basically what we presented was somebody who misses 3 consecutive meetings or 5 total meetings failed to meet the minimum level of attendance and shall be deemed to have resigned from the committee. So I'm going to stop sharing and turn this over to Bob to kind of help us understand the case law associated with this.
Sure. Of course, this is not case law I was familiar with at all, but someone who I think was watching the YouTube live stream sent me an email about it. And I looked it up, and I think he's absolutely right. But the question is, what due process do people need to have? There was a case that was decided by Judge Tabbitt in Kanawha County, which was State of West Virginia ex rel Rob Cornelius versus Mac Warner, and I think the West Virginia State Executive Committee of the Republican Party. And it had to do with removal of a member of, I guess, the county executive committee. And Judge Tabbitt held that because people were duly elected by the electorate, that they were entitled to certain due process rights. And then she proceeded to lay out what due process rights would be required. She relied on a 1909 case, which was Helmut versus Tucker County Court, where the legislature had set a road surveyor's term of office at 2 years, and the Tucker County Commission tried to just take it away from them after appointing them. They were not even actually an elected official. But court back then held that Helmick had a property interest in the position he had. And Judge Tabbitt held that members of county executive committees, and that would certainly apply to state executive committees who are elected, have a property interest in their position, which means that they're entitled to due process before they can be removed from office. And because the Republican Party, both at the county and at the state level, referred to Robert's Rules of Order, she used the Robert's Rules process, which involves confidential investigation by the committee, report of the committee and referral of charges if warranted, formal notification of the accused, trial, and assembly's review of the trial committee if the trial was held by a subcommittee, basically, instead of the full executive committee. So that essentially that case was appealed to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court eventually dismissed it as moot because everybody had changed hats by that time. But that doesn't have the effect of upholding Judge Tabbitt's decision, but it doesn't have the effect of overruling it either. It just leaves it stand as it was. And I think her decision was a correct decision. So, because I think having been elected, there is a property interest in holding the position. They can't be taken away except through due process. So I don't know that much process is due in the case of absences. But what I would propose is that we change what we'd originally done so that it says that meeting those are the missing 3 consecutive meetings or 5 total meetings of the state executive committee means that you fail to meet the minimum level of attendance, which shall be grounds for removal using, and I would suggest saying just using the procedure that's outlined in section 63 of Robert's Rules of Order. Let me see if I can.
I have a question. My limited knowledge of Robert's rules says that if you have rules in force that contradict these, feel free to use the rules in force. Robert's rules only apply when there are not rules in force. Is that correct? And if so, do we need to change this because we have rules in force?
Well, we don't have a procedure at this point. So without a procedure, I think it would fall back to Robert's Rules of Order.
We do have a
If we-
procedure, but hold on, we do have a procedure, but Mac also has his hand up. So when you finish whatever you're going to say, Bob, let me call on Mac.
And just before shall, I would put in which.
Okay.
And which shall be grounds for removal using the procedures of section 63 of Robert's Rules of Orders or any successor sections in later editions.
Okay, let me call on, thank you for that information. Let me call on Mac.
And then I would take out and shall be deemed to have resigned.
Okay,
Make that a strike. Yeah.
yes, I will.
To answer Dadi's question, in order of escalating preference, Robert's Rules of Order makes the foundation. Actually, it doesn't. There's a standing rule that can happen during meetings that makes the foundational rule for any organization. Then Robert's Rules of Order, the bylaws, the charter, state law, constitutional law. This is not a new question. And I brought this up whenever I was speaking with Selena, whenever she called. I went along with the removal because I believe that this is a debate that needs to be had. But again, the Supreme Court did not uphold this decision. Furthermore, we've seen a number of Ninth Circuit courts uphold bylaws as bylaws clauses concerning discipline and removal of members whenever it's actually brought to court and it's trialed out. I don't believe it's completely one-to-one, the case law that's being referenced between the GOP member and the party. And secondly, while referring to Rule 63, I would like to ask Bob to go back to Rule 62 on the page before it, Rule 62:16, that leads off with, except as the bylaws may provide otherwise, any regularly elected officer of a permanent society can be removed from office by the society's assembly as follows. It precludes any rules that are in the bylaws. I understand going back and amending this, or going back, withdrawing this from consideration initially till we could have a debate, but I do believe that the wording that we have would stand up in court in the scenario that is being used. There is, you're given forewarning. It does not equate to the Cornelius decision in that he was thrown off the committee without warning. We do have a system for due diligence and procedure. It can be appealed. It's completely appealable, whether that is to the Board of Appeals that we have now, or should we rework that to an appeals grievance committees, whatever you have you. The reason that that decision went to court is because he was thrown off without notice and he did not have an actual appeals process in place. He chose to take it directly to court. So that is where I stand. I answered Dady's question, and I offer a rebuttal point of view for the committee here, because having to either form a standing committee to process these issues, which we're already dealing with members who aren't showing up. You're dragging out giving people representation, active representation, even longer. It almost creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I don't believe that these changes are necessary, and that's where I stand on it, and I relinquish the floor.
Thank you, Matt. Judy?
Okay, basically, this was brought to light or brought into the Rules and Bylaws Committee because of the bylaws of the Democratic National Committee. Section 8, attendance and quorum and voting. Members of the National Committee appointed pursuant to the provisions of Section 2 of this article, who missed 3 consecutive meetings of the DNC, have failed to meet the minimum level of attendance and shall be deemed to have resigned from the Democratic National Committee. And that's how we came about even getting into this to start with. So that's where that all started from. The deal with Rob Cornelius, Potter kicked him out because she didn't like him. And that's what got that whole ball rolling. And I relinquish.
Thank you, Judy. Bob?
Yeah, I would just like to respond a little bit to what Mac had to say. First of all, there's a real significant difference here between this organization and any sort of regular organization. And the significant difference is that 68 of our members are elected by the electorate. People that are chosen as officers don't have to be among those members. And they can be removed any way we want to do it. But to remove somebody who's been elected by the electorate, we have to give them some kind of due process. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be what is in Robert's Rules of Order. We could create some separate process. But I think it's my legal opinion that Judge Abbott was absolutely right, and that if somebody wanted to challenge it, they would win if we didn't have some sort of a process to appeal the removal pre-removal. It can't be done. I mean, because it's a property interest, it has to be done before it can be taken. The due process has to occur before the position can be taken away. So we can create it. We don't have to use Section 63. I just came up with that because that's what Judge Abbott used. But I don't think there's any question but that somebody who's elected by the electorate can't be removed except with some sort of procedure before removal occurs. We can establish grounds for that. We have some other grounds in another part of this. And I think our grounds are reasonable, but we have to give them some chance to appeal it before they're actually removed, not after they're removed.
So let me ask you this. So, and I'm a big fan of Robert's Rules. I think that their whole, I think it's like chapter 20 or something like that, it's very, very good, very, very thorough. However, we do have in our bylaws currently a process for removing members, and I just pulled it up. It's now it's Article 5, Section 10, removal and disqualification of members and officers. And I don't want to take us way down a rabbit hole, and because one thing is we haven't removed this, we haven't reviewed this section. We don't even know if we want to change any of this. But I did want to say, if we do say that if we decide to take Bob's suggestion of saying that missing what our policy, breaking that policy, it's grounds for removal. One option might be to then say, put something in there basically, which can be, referred pursuant to, Section 10 or something like that. I don't know exactly, but I'm wondering if that might keep us from having to really chop it up, but still provide due process using the process that we already have. So I'm going to be quiet and see what people, if there's thoughts on that. I see Judy's hand.
Okay, in section J in the bylaws, the removal and disqualification of members and officers, there's a whole thing here that talks about how you remove a member and what actions you need to take. And I think that if we're going to have the discussion about what we're doing here with the 3 and the 5, these things should be connected, should they not? Because it's the same subject.
I guess I don't understand how it's connected to the Section 5, but I'm not sure. But anyway, Bob, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm certainly not wedded to the procedure that's in Robert's rules. We can create our own procedure or refer to former Section J, new Section 10. But that particular section will need a lot of clearing up to make it clear what procedures and what the grounds are. And I think that when we get to that section, we have to really distinguish. It's one thing to remove Teresa Torreseva as an officer because she was never elected by the electorate. And it's another thing to remove Judy Stevens as a member because she was elected by the electorate. Those are two really separate categories, and we have to make sure that we at least provide the required due process before removing any elected member.
Mac?
I tend not to enjoy the technicalism of the legal field. That's why I'm a parliamentarian and not a lawyer.
Yeah.
However, I would have a question for Bob concerning the current wording and how it relates to the case law that he's describing. The current wording of the bylaws suggests that missing 3 meetings would be taken as a resignation, and that we're not removing them, but we are equating missing 3 meetings to a resignation. I am not a technicalist, but a resignation is much different than a removal.
Well, essentially what happened in Wood County is that they resigned Cornelius, or whatever his name was. They considered him to have resigned. I think that saying that somebody has, I think that people ought to be able to present evidence that they didn't miss 3 consecutive meetings, or that they didn't miss 5 total meetings, or that they had some awfully darn good reason. But the latter we can consider whether somebody should be able to use a good reason or not, or whether there should be no reason, but they ought to be able to have a chance to show that they didn't miss those meetings. Because anybody can say that somebody missed 3 straight meetings. And it's in the minutes, so maybe they can't, but.
Well, that is the point of having a
Yeah,
good secretary.
exactly.
Oh, go on.
Yeah, that's essentially it. I mean, I'm a lawyer, not a parliamentarian, but not out of any particular philosophy about it.
Well, the way that I would read this as a parliamentarian is this is arguably, this could be seen as an expansion of a member's rights. You can turn in a written resignation, or you can miss 3 consecutive meetings or 5 total. It is another tool that you can use to represent yourself in an organization.
Yeah, I'd be almost 100% certain that a court wouldn't agree with that.
Well, I don't know how the court would feel about it, but and I think your experience, Bob, with the courts is worth taking in. But I do know that, just to be honest, that there are some people that were really concerned about this, and I feel like we would have a more difficult time. I think that most people are in agreement that we need to have an attendance policy. With that said, I think that with knowledge of this court case and the case law, I think it would be very difficult for us to get past as it's currently written. I think that we would have, I feel like to get it passed in with the state executive committee, we're going to have to show that there is a due process. Now, I might be wrong. I mean, we could maybe get this through, but from my perspective is that it would be very difficult if we do not build in a very clear due process. I think it would be very hard for us to get it passed through the state executive committee. That's a political problem. That's not a rule problem. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I
That's
know what you mean.
it's just the politics of the way the committees run.
Yeah.
I would say at least change it to section 10 or yes, section J or section 10 instead of RONR. Then we can hash out procedures that make sense later.
Okay. And because that section, well, before we go any further, is there a sense from the committee? Is there anybody that really hates this idea of just making this grounds for removal to then, refer back to this section 10 for due process?
I'm sorry.
I'm just trying to, before we keep working down this path of thinking, I just wanted to see if anybody majorly objected to this line of reasoning where we're going. Looks like we're going. Okay, hearing none. All right, so because that section talks about good cause, that a member can be, removed for good cause, would we want to put that language in here, Bob? Should be
Instead of grounds,
considered
we can
good
have shall
cause.
be good cause for removal.
Okay.
Second that.
Good cause for removal. This is a very rough language using procedures. We might want to come back to that. Okay, so good cause. Let me go back down to section 10.
Yeah, section 10 is a mess.
It is. I agree. All right. So let me just kind of read the disqualification. The executive committee itself shall be the judge of the qualifications and disqualifications of its members. No person who is not a democratic elector of the political subdivision which they expect to represent shall serve, and removal of residence of the member from the political subdivision will automatically result in vacancy. So that's like automatic disqualification. removal of a member. Any member may be removed from membership by the affirmative vote of 3/5 of the voting members. Action to initiate the removal shall be instituted upon the showing of good cause by affidavits of 2 or more members. The 2 or more members making such an affidavit must be present and subject to questioning at the special or regular meeting at which such removal is to be considered. Notice of such meeting shall be given to the member whose removal is to be considered at least 15 days prior to the date of the meeting, at which time and place said member shall have the right to be heard on the matter of his or her removal. Upon determination of guilt, the chair shall declare the position immediately vacant and shall proceed forthwith to fill the vacancy. Good cause shall include, but not be restricted to, willful and intentional conduct in violation of these bylaws, aiding or supporting an opposing political party or candidate of any opposing political party, or conviction of a felony. Should such charges be brought by the chair or first vice chair, the first vice chair shall preside at the meeting. At any time the first vice chair refuses to act in a case of this kind, the second vice chair shall preside. If the second vice chair refuses to act, one of the associate chairs shall preside. We put a lot of focus on the succession of who's going to preside. All right, so where are our major, basically what this means is that it comes down to 3/5 of the voting members to remove.
Yeah,
So
That's pretty significant, percentage of people.
it's a high percentage, but
it's more.
it probably
Typically
should
would be
be,
2/3.
it probably should be clear enough to persuade that many people. I
Yeah,
suppose-
So the other option, go ahead, Mac. I'm sorry, you had your hand up. And I'm sorry, I'm looking at 2 different screens. If you have your hand up and I don't call you, please say something.
The chair's rights are more important. Go ahead.
I'm good. Go ahead.
Okay. I have no problem with the 3/5 number. And the reason for that is if you're going to be removing a member, that should be a higher standard than a majority. That's a basic right of a member. I have no problem with that number. The question comes down to, in this instance, who would be the 2 people bringing forward affidavits to fulfill Section 10B is a requirement that there must be an affidavit by 2 or more members. Because if it's being brought forth for attendance, then that leaves a question of who has been wrong to bring those affidavits, or whose responsibility would it be. On the other hand, we could form a committee to deal with this. That's still an option. My primary concern with this is we're removing someone for not attending. We don't want to create a scenario where we have to have 30 days notice for an election and this, that, and the other, that stacks on top of that and delays that position having proactive representation in their district. So we should consider carefully while looking at this, what we can do to expedite this process, while still accounting for the rights of the individual member.
Thank you, Mac. Dottie.
A question. It says 3/5 of the voting members. So if someone is absent at that meeting, then they're not considered one of the voting members. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And so going back to the good cause, could we then add good cause for would be missing whatever that number of meetings is, and consider that one of the good causes? Is that a possibility, and would that take care of some problems?
Think it should be done just for good practice. I think that's a best practice thing right there.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. That's why I asked, why we couldn't join these two.
And it could refer back to section 3.
Yeah,
Well, let me ask you this question. Well, okay, let me just speak to the 3/5. I think the 3/5 is, I think we should have a high bar for things like that. I think 3/5 is really, really high. I think 2/3 is appropriate. So we don't have to really go into that now, but I think it's
2/3 is higher than 3/5 though.
Oh, is it? Okay, never mind.
2/3 is 67%. 3/5 is only 60.
Oh, okay, all right.
And
sorry about
you al-
that.
yeah,
I thought
you
I
also-
calculated it before and it was higher, so thank you for that.
And also, on the other hand, and this is something we parliamentarians do as a trick, it is 3/5 of voting members, not of the membership. So
Right.
if your quorum is 50% and then you require a 3/5 vote, well, you're automatically down to just 29% of the membership has to vote in favor. And this is something that we do need to keep in mind.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Okay, all right, well, never mind that, sorry. I think the other option is referral, and we're going to be, we know that we have to tackle Board of Appeals. The other option is to have absentee or violations of the absentee policy be referred to the Board of Appeals, and then have the appeal of the Board of Appeals be to the full committee. So that way, the thing about that is it would automatically, maybe if you break the attendance policy, it would be automatically referred to the Board of Appeals for removal or some. We could figure out how to do that, and the Board of Appeals job would be to investigate, to go, yes, there have been 5 absences in whatever the term, and that they would then make the decision, and it would be there. They wouldn't be affidavits, they would just make their decision. And then if a person wanted to appeal that, then they would have the possibility of appealing that to the full state executive committee, which would then we would have to, figure out the whole 3/5 thing or whatever. But that's another option for us to consider. And I'm beginning to think that might be a better option.
I agree. Having 2 people to file an affidavit, you might not have much luck with that.
Well, and it puts an enormous amount of a burden on people, because I'm thinking, well, who would that be? Well, you don't want it to be the chair. Just politically, that would be a nightmare for a chair. We could say it has to be the secretary. We might say that's one of the secretary duties, but what if the secretary doesn't do it? Who's the other person? You know what I mean? And then it would be easier for somebody to be really upset about whoever the 2 people are, even, you know what I mean? And if it's just an automatic referral to the Board of Appeals, that would sort of take that out. Mac, go ahead.
Also consider Robert's Rules of Order treats committees and boards making a reference or report as having at least the support of 2 members. That's why reports and motions out of committee do not require a second. Because in order to have a committee, you have to have at least a chair and a secretary. So anything coming out of committee is deemed to have the support of at least 2 members. So that does fit philosophically with the suggestion. However, might we consider referring this to the drafting committee, who is due to begin looking at the Board of Appeals, the grievance process and all of that, and have them tackle this at the same time? as they go about making those changes and bring them back to us for further discussion?
Well, yes, and I think that we'll get there. But we had, referred stuff to the drafting before when we were trying to rush to get things. We kind of gave some, a little bit of a carte blanche on some issues. And personally, I don't know how you felt about it, but I felt that I thought it would be easier, but in my mind, it was harder because we didn't have the things that I thought were really easy to draft or things that we had a full discussion about here, and that we went into the drafting committee like knowing what the committee wanted to do. That's my thought. Other people, Bob, or you might feel differently, but I just wanted to kind of, because this was like a really key issue and we had this case law. What I really felt that we could do is just really parse out what we wanted to do, and then the drafting committee could do it. Although, I'm just putting this up here because I do well visually when I see things up. Anyway, that's my thought on it.
Yeah, I think the whole committee should have some input on it before it goes to the drafting committee. That way they have a starting point.
So Bob, what are your thoughts on that? If we would make it, we could still leave this here at the good cause as missing meetings, still have that people could do this, but build into the attendance up here, it would be referred to the Board of Appeal. I'm not sure exactly how to do it, but
it seems to me that the real problem in terms of figuring out how you start the process is that it's still a political process at some level, and there'll be people who don't want people removed for lack of attendance because they know they'll support them on issues. Regardless of what side or of any issue they might be. So I would think that in the case of attendance, it would make that somebody has to point it out anyway. If nobody points anything out, then nothing happens. So I don't know what I think would be the best process for starting it, but if you have a secretary that's supporting somebody and they know the person that's going to be removed is also supporting that person and for some whatever, then it's going to be somebody there has to be somebody other than the secretary starting it. I guess I would think that any two members or any one member could raise the issue and send it for refer it to a board or to whatever else we want to do it to. I thought I heard people suggest that it get referred to the Board of Appeals as the first step. But if I heard that wrong.
no, you did. I threw that out for consideration.
And
I
I
would think
agreed.
that anyone, maybe just a single person would be sufficient to refer somebody to the Board of Appeals. And then the question is how to make sure that the Board of Appeals acts if it's someone that they actually, we've had problems with the Board of Appeals in the past, let's say that.
Yeah, we have. And I think what we're hoping to go to is an elected Board of Appeals instead of appointed Board of Appeals. So, and having rules of procedure for them to follow, which we hope will be good. I don't think that I don't think we're going to get completely away from, there's a political aspect to things. I mean, I know that we want to, and I think all we can do is set the rules up and do the best that we can. But there's probably always going to be a little bit of that. Mac, I saw your hand up for a second and you took it down, but I just wanted to make sure you didn't wanted to add something.
No, I just wanted to say that's why, because we do need to make changes to the Board of Appeals. That's why I suggested, excuse me. I suggested we tackle these issues in conjunction. In the end, I view this as a disciplinary issue, and that's what they're going to be tackling. I'm sitting here not just with Robert's Rules of Order in front of me. I've got Riddick's Parliamentary Manual, Dunbar's, Bournois. I'm going through some different removal processes right now to maybe bring back a suggestion later. This might not be a problem we solve tonight, and it might be in our interest to consider that. So.
Oh yeah, I agree. Dottie.
Yeah, would it be possible to have the secretary prior to every meeting issue a matrix or a table of who all have attended each meeting for the present year? So, and then that way, someone who's missed a lot of meetings, that will stand out, and people can take action on that as necessary. And we don't have to rely on happenstance or somebody looking at the right place.
I think that we could probably build that into the duties of the secretary to make that attendance sheet, put it on the website or something like that. That's something that we could probably, ask her to do, or put it in the duties if that's something that we want to do. I see Judy's hand up.
Yeah, I was just gonna suggest like a chart or an Excel sheet that, when you start getting close to the point where you're missing too much, like, you're written out in red, so it shows up, and it be sent along with the minutes whenever we have a meeting.
Well, I like it because, there's so many, 68 of these positions are, elected from the districts. And I think districts have a right to know if their person is showing up. So
Yeah.
Bob, go ahead.
Yeah, I was sure I keep losing it. But I was going to say that I think if we have all this in the rules, that hopefully people, when they see that they've missed 3 straight meetings or 5 total meetings, that would be, in general, would be willing to resign to let somebody replace them. Despite the fact of having been elected, I would think that they could be jawboned into resigning to some extent, that we wouldn't have to go through all the hearings that we're setting up.
Oh, well, that would be ideal. That would be ideal. I'm not going to hold my breath, but all right. Well, all right. So I want to move on to the other section to talk about. I think that the other section we might be able to come to a conclusion, but just for right now, before we move on, I just want to I feel like we're kind of in agreement, but I'm going to say what I think our agreement is at this point. And please say if I'm wrong about that. But I think our agreement is that we want to make sure that we build in some type of a due process to address the case law. And in our section 3, we want to refer to whatever that due process is, which might be referring to section 10 on the removal. However, we also are sort of leaning towards, the option of referral to the Board of Appeals, although, that's sort of nebulous. We haven't got there yet. But is that, am I correct in thinking that's sort of where we're at right now?
I think so.
Okay. And of the 2 options of referring to section 10, removal of a member, or referring to the Board of Appeals, of those two options, I think we're sort of more leaning towards referral to Board of Appeals. Is that correct?
I think that's right for me.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, all right. So we have
But-
something, I think the drafting committee has something to go on. And so
Yeah.
Mac has
The
just,
next sentence might need to be modified some, but I think that it wouldn't be, that shouldn't be any problem for the
yeah,
draft.
and that the language that I have up there is not solid language. That was just to sort of give us a gist of where we're going. Okay. So, and we do want to make this a violation of the tenants policy good cause for removal. We know that. Okay, so could we ask you, Mac, you have several things in front of you that in terms of that might be sort of a quick fix and or something already put together. Would it be possible for you to summarize options for us and maybe send out an email for us to just consider any of those things that you think would be things that we might want to consider for this?
Are you referring to referencing the other parliamentary authorities?
Those things that you just mentioned, you said, I'm looking at several things, and I got the sense that there were already procedures in those things that you mentioned that may be helpful.
Yeah, I could, let's see, I unfortunately back on short weeks, I could have something out to the committee by the end of business Tuesday that summarizes 4 or 5 different options.
Okay. And if they're horrible options and you think we'd hate them, don't feel obligated to throw those in there. Just things that you think that the committee might like.
Sure.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And if you don't get it done by Tuesday, you're not gonna, that's fine. Okay, so let's move on to this other section. And I want, well, either Bob or Judy can take this because this one threw me for a loop. Go ahead, either one of you.
Okay, are you talking about when the offices are?
Serve until, until
Yeah.
their people are, that part.
According to state code, your offices start July 1st or when your successor is elected. And it says it in like 3 different places. I read them to you whenever I talked to you the last time. Says shall hold their several offices and discharge the duties thereof until their successors are chosen and installed in accordance with the provisions of Section 9 of this article. And it says that in a couple places, and that's the state code. So it's not firm, you serve until July 1st and then you're out. Because like in my situation, Wood County was left for 2 months without a chair because of the July 1st thing. And that's not what the state code says.
Now, I just want to add that when we were kind of dealing with something in Fayette County, I called the Secretary of State and asked about the term ending for the officers, and the Secretary of State office. And this is the reason that I thought this is because they said that everybody's term ends on June 30th. And so we needed to set a meeting, but what ended up happening, we didn't have anybody call an organizational meeting. So we had to wait until July 1, and then any of the newly elected members could call a meeting, call the organizational meeting. And so I ended up doing that on July 1. So that's where that was, I just sort of assumed that Secretary of State, but that is, I mean, it's a 3110. It's state code, and we looked at it. So the reason that we built in this piece right here and the way we worded the way we did is that I think we all felt that it was unfair for anybody that's an officer to be an officer for the whole 4 years, then go into the organizational meeting and be able to, and we have a lot of officers. We got like 15 officers. And that, I mean, 15 people can really make a difference in terms of voting. So those 15 people could go in, vote on the new officers, and vote for themselves, against themselves, or whatever. And we felt that that was unfair. If their term was finished, that they should not have a vote on the new terms officers. And so the reason we worded this way, we wanted there to be a very clear delineation of them ending their term so that they would not have a vote at the organizational meeting. And so now, so the way the rules are written, the law is written, we can't do that. They have to, I guess, serve until they pick somebody. But I still think that it's possible for us to write this in a way that they'll serve, but they won't have a vote at the organizational meeting. And maybe we can put that in somehow in the duties or something. I'm not sure, but that was my original thought, Judy.
Okay, well, like I said in the code, we serve until July 1st. You're going to have officers to conduct the meeting. For one, and then once the officers have been elected, the old officers would step back and the new officers would take their place. It's not like they would be able to have control. There wouldn't be two of each. Am I making any sense?
Yeah, but there's like, if you start with the chair, vice chair, you go on down. If you are like, one of the last things elected is the associate secretary. So the associate secretary of the term before would be able to have a vote on all 14 offices before them. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Maybe,
Bob?
yeah, maybe what we should do is provide that the officers, that that only the incoming 68 elected officials are voting, and that as officers are elected, that the new ones will be able to vote as they replace the old officers. But we want to, as a first order of business, we want to install the 68 people that have been elected, or whatever it is. 68.
Well, okay, but keep in mind you have those 68, and then you have a certain number. I think
Right.
there's like 5 ex officios or something like that, and then
More than 68, but the people that are there by virtue of having been elected either by the electorate or by their organization, which would include the affirmative action folks, at least 2 of them.
yeah, and then the first order of business would be the 3 at large and the diversity at large before you go into officers. But we just need to figure out how the 15 officers that already exist from the previous term, how do we keep them from voting in the organizational meeting?
Well, any of them who were elected to one of the 68 slots and also elected as an officer should be able to vote.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm not, and I should have clarified that. I'm not talking about
That's
them.
why I was saying that only the 68 plus we'd have to specify the others, the affirmative action, and any new officers already elected. So if we elect, I think at last June, we elected the chairperson, the chair first.
On the officers, we did.
Yeah.
But
And
after
then-
we filled the at-larges and diversity at-larges first, and then we went into the chair, vice chair, second vice chair.
Yeah, you always get the new members or the elected members first. That
Mhm.
way they have a vote.
Exactly. So if you look at this part right here, any member shall have the right to cast their vote on any question that may come before the committee. So with that wording, they would be old officers that have not been, you're at the organizational meeting, you're waiting to either be reelected or maybe you're not even running. You still, at the way it stands right now, is that they still have a vote.
Well,
Bob, you
if
still have your hand up.
If, sorry.
Yeah. and
Bob, do you still have anything else to say?
Yeah, I just think that old officers who aren't elected to a district shouldn't have a vote.
Oh, I agree, but how do we keep that from happening? I mean, how do we word that? That's our conundrum. I think everybody agrees with that.
Well,
But how do we word that to not break law? And I think there's a way to do it. How do we not break law and write that in?
if
So-
everybody agrees with that, I think we can refer it to the drafting committee.
Okay. Okay, let me see. Let me take Dottie. Dottie, go ahead.
You're muted.
Good thing you didn't hear me cuss because I was muted. I think a lot of what I said was covered by Bob and Judy, but just to put it, I have a real problem with believing that the organization would serve for any period of time without officers. I mean, go back to Old English history and the period between the death of a monarch and the crowning of another one was considered the interregnum, where crime was allowed because there was no law. And then they established that the new monarch took office right after the death of the old one, who didn't need a coronation. So I don't think we need to do that. But I think what we need to do is simply to say that officers who are not members elected to the DEC do not have a vote in the election unless after they are elected. So I think, again, agreeing with Bob, that's something for the drafting committee to sort out.
Say that last thing one more time, Dottie.
Officers who are not members of the executive committee
Not elected to
should
the
not
DEC.
vote.
Oh,
Ones that haven't been elected through the electoral procedure. They,
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
it used to be like that and they changed that. So that's something to consider, is that unless you are duly elected and serve in some other type of role, you don't have a vote. Matt?
I do think it's angels on the head of a pin, though, because I have little experience at this, but I think we're dealing with a small number of votes. But
well, usually a chair doesn't vote unless there's a tie anyway.
Yeah, Matt, go ahead.
We do have, and this might make this entire thing moot. Given that this is in the section on conventions. Am I correct on that? I don't have these bylaws memorized since we've updated them. This is in the convention section, isn't it?
What are you talking about?
This section 6. This is explicitly the organizational convention, correct?
No.
No.
This is this section right here is just officers. This is in State Executive
Article
Committee,
5.
Article 5. Mhm.
We do have a section concerning the convention where we could place the rule that I do like the negative wording.
Let me just, you use, when you say convention, I think you mean organizational meeting.
Yes.
Okay,
Mhm.
all right, because let's use that, because convention is that there's a whole article on the state convention.
In the organizational meeting, we could put a special rule in as part of the convention rules that in order to vote, you must be a duly elected member of that election year. or an officer elected at that convention. I do like the negative wording that if you are not a duly elected member in that election year, you do not get to vote. So I do think it should be framed in the negative, but it should capture those 2 points. And that could just be a rule of the organizational meeting. Yeah, section 5. There we go.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Where's
I
the
think-
organizational meeting? Which,
So Article 5, Section 5.
Yeah, it was section F.
Mhm.
Yeah.
now it's section.
Because we are free to create special rules for that meeting under state law. And we could get rid of this whole 30 days before June 1st or July
Mhm.
1st sort of language completely. And just insert that clause there
I like that.
and have the same effect. And I don't believe it's cleaner, but I believe it's more efficient.
I like it. What about,
And I
what do you
yield.
guys think?
So what's the language you're suggesting? And where?
So under, it's still Article 5, State Executive Committee, but under the organizational meeting, he hasn't exactly said what the language is, but it would be something to the effect of like only duly elected members and ex officio members and at large
Yeah, I'd definitely be a lot more
Commas in
succinct than
between
that.
those.
are are
Duly
shall-
elected in the
shall vote.
same election year shall be able to vote. Yeah,
in the same election year, but we have to include, I mean, I think we need to include ex officios and the at-larges.
Does
No,
ex-
not, well, yeah, the
Would-
at-larges will be out, your ex officios would still be in, and then they will put in that year. There we go.
yeah, because the ex officios would be elected anyway there.
Well, no, they'll be coming in. They'll be like the president of the Young Dems, the president of the blah, blah,
Well,
blahs.
the at-larges would be elected before the chair anyway, is what I was saying.
Yes.
The at-larges,
Yes.
things like that. So the idea is you limit it to that same election year. And say they shall be able to vote. You're not kicking out members or removing members. You're just instituting a special rule for the organizational meeting.
Mhm. Okay, we might have to work on this wording, but it would be something like that, Bob.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we would
And that's
strike.
what we were talking about putting in the, in section 6, right? Pretty much similar to.
Yeah,
Well,
same thing, just
The-
moved
the
up.
Part of section 6 we have to take out is the part that ends one day before the new term or until June 30th.
Yeah, we can just remove that. That hasn't been
Yes.
approved
Yeah.
and that can just go.
Yeah,
Right.
'cause that kind of stuck in my craw there, because if, the officers are kicked off the day before, who's gonna run the meeting? You
Right.
gotta have
Yeah, no,
somebody to run the
That
meeting.
should definitely come out, I think.
Well, and just so you know, I mean, the state law does provide for the chair, the previous chair to do that. So that was sort of our reasoning behind that. But
Right.
I like this better. I think this is actually, I think it's smoother, and I like it.
To put it
Okay.
in 5, yeah, okay. I don't have any objections to where it goes. It's just a question of figuring out the best way to make it clear that the previous officers who weren't elected to the new term don't get to vote in the organizational meeting.
Mhm.
So
And
you're
I
going,
think we might have to take this out, or work on this language.
Where's that?
Any member shall have the right to cast their vote on any question that may come before the committee. We might have to add something about with the exception of section 5 or something, limits in section 5.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not saying that's language, but at least we know basically what that works. Okay, does this seem good for folks? So what we're doing is striking out this old language about the term ending the day before the organizational meeting. We're striking that. We're saying that
I want
they-
to, you might want to strike all the way back to the 9.
okay. And all the officers, everybody will still be able to have a vote on everything except for, state, except for in section 5, we come down, we go up to section 5, and we have the organizational meeting, and there will be a special rule written in here that only duly elected members in the same election year and ex officio members shall vote. Well, that will probably be tightened up to be a little bit clearer. But that will be a special rule in the organizational meeting section. Does this fix our problem, and are we comfortable with it?
But I think the wording needs to be worked on, but one thing
Yes.
that do you want to have newly elected at-large members voting later on down the line?
No.
For a chair?
No. Personally, I don't. And the reason I don't is because the at-large members add to the diversity. The big problem with that was related to that memo of understanding and everything is that we did not have a diverse group that could run and well, they could run, but be a part of electing a chair. So it's important to have our base people, our 68, we have our ex officio, and then add our at large and our diversity at large. So we have a, hopefully that will meet our representative goals, and we'll be talking about, I want to have a whole meeting about affirmative action and representative goals and figuring out stuff related to that. But
which ones of these in the order of business are you calling ex officio? Because I think that might be a term of art. Matt would know that for sure. I don't know.
They're not, we don't add them. They're ex officios, they're automatic members. And those are listed in here somewhere. I can't remember
Like
exactly.
the past chair, Young Dems,
Yeah.
Democratic Women's Federation. All ex
Yeah.
officio.
Past chair?
Yeah. That's a at-large member, but West Virginia president of County Chairs Association. So whoever that is automatically a voting member. Whoever the president of the Young Dems, automatically a voting member. President of the Federation of Democratic Women, automatic. Whoever the leader of the House and the leader of the Senate, well, not the leader of them, but the leader of the Democrats are automatically. And then this should be taken out because the associate chairs are not ex officio members. But the two people who is the affirmative action co-chairs are automatic members. That's listed somewhere else, but that should be listed here as well. But those are just automatic members. We don't do any voting or even ratifying of them.
Okay. Is automatic members a better term than ex officio members? For some reason, Mac, if you could help out, I'd appreciate it. I have a recollection that ex officio actually has a specific meaning.
Give me one moment. I can give you the definition of ex officio right from the rules if you give me like 90 seconds.
All right,
Okay.
while you're doing that, I'm going to call on Dottie.
Duly elected members, that includes also people that were elected in previous years, but whose term of office is still continuing. Is that not correct? In other words, not just people who were elected right now.
Dottie, I think that, go ahead, Celia, I'm sorry.
I think that we should put in some terms and definitions in these bylaws because, like ex officio, like duly elected. But when I think of duly elected, those are people who are elected from their constituencies in the current term. So that's how I look at it. So Bob was elected by the people from Senate District 9 to one of those 68 Senate district seats. And so he is duly elected from his constituencies.
And Dottie would be duly elected by the Affirmative Action Committee.
Yes.
But I have a 4-year term. So I'm not freshly elected, let's say next year. Am I duly elected next year?
Yeah, because it's within the term. Yes.
So it's not just elected within this cycle.
Well, you wouldn't serve a complete 4-year term because you were elected after the election.
So you're elected to complete a term, an unfulfilled
Right,
term.
but while that term is there, I'm duly elected.
You were
Until 26.
Not freshly elected, I guess.
not freshly elected.
Just duly elected.
All right, and we're at 8:11. So when we get back from Mac, if we're in a good place, I think that we should move to wrap up and adjourn unless anybody has anything pressing. Mac, you have anything for us yet? And if not, we can have it later. Go ahead, Mac.
Yeah, and then I had a question after, but Robert's Rules of Order defines an ex officio member as a member of office that carries with it the rights necessary for executing the duties of the office, and it does not deprive a member of the society of his rights as a member. If a member holds an office in a society of which he is not a member, the bylaws make that officer an ex officio member.
Wow.
And they are a full-fledged member with all the accompanying rights, and this does not deny them membership of the society. The bylaws may contain a provision that no person shall be eligible to serve blank consecutive terms of an office. If in filling the vacancies for an expired term, an officer who has served more than half the term in an office is to have to be considered to have served a full term. That's just an officer's provision underneath. But yeah, it is essentially ex officio is any member who is granted full rights within a society. So in this case, that is our recognition of the co-chairs of the diversity caucuses, the presidents of West Virginia Democratic Federation of Women, et cetera, et cetera. They meet that term almost perfectly.
Yeah, and from the charter language, those organizations are considered recognized organizations, and because they're recognized, they are expected to follow the charter and the bylaws, the national charter and bylaws, as well as our bylaws. All right, okay, so I think that we're good on that. Maybe not the language exactly, but basically where we want this to be. We want to have in the organizational section some specific language about who can vote. And then we're going to strike some stuff up here that we had related to, I'm sorry, down here. We're just going to strike that and put that somewhere else. So is anybody in disagreement with that? Okay, all right, so we're not through with everything on the agenda. That's okay. I didn't think that we would, but just in case we did, and I like to have other stuff on there. Our next meeting, oh wait, Mac, was there something else? I think you said you had a question. I'm sorry.
Yes, I had sent to you 2 proposals for consideration at some point by this committee. A section on subcommittees and a section on rules for meetings not in person. I was asking for the chair's thoughts on when those might be on the agenda, and yeah.
Okay, I have not looked at them, Mac. I'm sorry about that. Can I get back with you on that?
Sure.
Okay.
I
you.
do think just speaking candidly, I do think the subcommittee section is going to become pertinent soon. Just looking at across the state and some of the things going on. So if
Okay.
it comes down to a matter of devoting time to one issue or the other, I would like to edge toward the subcommittees.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you so much for the work that you've done, Mac. Nikki, thank you for, let me stop sharing. I always forget to do that. Thank you for the work that you do to keep us straight in the parliamentarian area. Bob, I know that you did a lot of reading and research related to that case law. I really, really appreciate that. Appreciate all of you all. Katie, thank you for taking care of us on all the behind the scenes and YouTube stuff. We really appreciate you. And Dottie, again, welcome. All right, so the drafting committee will do some work between now and our next meeting, which is going to be on June 8th at 6:30, to bring some stuff, some specific language back for you guys to look at. And then in the meantime, Mac is going to send us some language related to due process. And then I'm going to look at the things that he sent me related to subcommittees and rules for meetings that are not in person. Anything else anybody has before we adjourn? All right, could I have
Actually,
go ahead.
Bob, do you have a copy of the Tabit opinion? I'd like to read through it.
Yes, I do have a copy of it. I think I was trying to send it to myself and didn't have much luck. I have it saved on Acrobat, but I think I can figure out how to send it to you, Mac. What's your email?
Just haltermanmac@gmail.com.
I'm sorry, Halterman Mac?
Yeah, mac@gmail.com.
Yep.
And I don't mind that being out in the public sphere because it's already the email I used on my campaign. So get special people emailing me all the time.
Would
Yeah,
anybody
I'd
else
like
like
to
to
read
have
through-
it? Oh, I'm sorry, Mac. I didn't mean to talk over you.
No, I just said I'd like to have it while I'm composing. I'm reading through the other disciplinary rules from some other parliamentary authorities. I might be able to peruse them more efficiently if I know the standard I need to reach.
Okay. I will send that to you.
And Mac, I'm sorry, Bob, other members may want to have that to read. Would anybody else like to have it? I'd like to have it. I don't know if I have time to read it, but I'd love to
Let
have
me
it.
try to, why don't I send it to you, Selena, and you can send it out to everybody.
Okay,
because
all right. Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds good.
I'll do
All right.
that.
Oh, we lost Ray along the line somewhere. I didn't see him drop off. Okay, all right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, and I see a second. All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. All right. We're adjourned. Thank you all so very much.